that are non-road access that are in this region. So what we're trying to do in Yavatang, we're trying to create an a strategic level environmental assessment for this region. So what that includes, these communities don't have access to running water. They're on boil water well, they have access to running water, but they've been on boil water for 25 years. Houses are made of, a lot of them are made of plyboard. There was a string of arson in about 8 years ago, and none of those houses have been rebuilt, so there's overcrowding in a lot of the homes. What's really amazing is a lot of the arson was actually related to substance abuse problems, and the community has self-funded an addictions counseling program for their community. And it's been really effective, run by the nurses station. But if you're a student in Fort Hope, at grade 8, you have to decide if you want to go on to high school. And if you want to go to high school, you have to go 300 kilometers south of Thunder Bay, where there is a tremendous amount of racism. It's really horrible for a lot of the people that go there. A friend of mine who works up there, he told me about, he was going to college for forestry, and how he got mugged in the middle of winter going back from a class and left in an alley. They took his coat, they took his money, and they took a crowbar and broke his arm. And there's this huge scar. And it wasn't about a pity or anything. He just was saying to me why he hadn't finished college, but he wants to go back eventually when he feels better. And it was one of those moments where I was, you feel your privilege all the time, but it was one of those sickening moments where you just can't even visualize it. So these communities are in this really challenging position. It costs $22 for a pound of bacon in Fort Hope. They are dependent on their traditional economy to feed their families. They also have an incredible spiritual and cultural bond to the land. But they additionally want their children and their grandchildren to have better opportunities than they did. Lots of people from their communities have had to go south. Like half of the Yavatang community is actually in Thunder Bay and Timmins and these regions where they can have economic opportunities. So the fact is they're in this really challenging position where they would like economic development, and some of them wouldn't at all, but some of them would like as much as possible. But what does that look like? And how does it work for the long run? How do you, say, build a road from Pickle Lake that can connect all of these communities and be good long-term, but also help assist in mining? How do you actually operate an open-pit chromite mine in Muskeg? How do you do all these things? I mean, I don't have the answers to these questions. I certainly don't. But what my role in this entire process is to help them develop criteria based on what they ideally would like for a sustainable community. I'm a resource, I'm a tool. I have all this education and this stuff. So this is what is your vision of a sustainable community, and how do we peel back the layers to get there? We call it, one of the ways we do that is looking at scenarios. So if we had full development of this region, we had mines operating on the whole thing, what roads would you need? What hydroelectric projects, because there's lots of hydroelectric opportunities in these rivers. What would you do to have that happen? And do you like what that looks like? What happens if you have no development? What happens in those intermediate areas? And if one of those scenarios is what you want, how do we back past that to figure out what we want for the future? And we're working on it. I'm probably going up again in July to hang out with these folks to keep on the dialogue. So it's really challenging. And this is primarily, resource development is primarily a provincial concern. So the province of Ontario doesn't have a lot of experience with mining. So they're also figuring out a lot of this as we go. And it's also really challenging because First Nations concerns fall under federal jurisdiction. So where the feds in the province jurisdictionally meet, with wood buffalo, that's actually even a bigger problem because you have BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Northwest Territories, the feds, and like 6 different First Nations and Indigenous communities. So if you look at the next picture, I have a couple pictures of these are not mine because my computer died on Friday. Well, I killed my computer on Friday. it wasn't manslaughter, it was accidental, I promise. But so this is sort of, you can see the Musquet. You can, canoeing around here is it's supposed to be really beautiful. And this is Gavetone, and that's the airport, because it's only fly-in. And though these guys all have trucks, because they brought in on the ice roads in winter, and you just see them rolling around in the trucks. You can always get a ride. It's really fun. And they'll drive them around, they'll wreck the suspension because there's like potholes and everything, and they'll take them hunting and stuff, and then they'll resell them because they'll drive them back down because the mileage is really low. So which I think, hey, you know, colonial oppression, that's the one way to get us back, right? Anyway, so this is this is their community, and they're really awesome people, and I'm really lucky to get to work with them. I think that's it. I'm really excited for questions. It was really nice to actually get to talk to folks from town and talk about what I do. I think a lot of people know I do environmental stuff, but I never actually talk about what I do because I feel it might be boring. So it was really nice to actually, you know, the folks came to listen tonight because now I think it's, I'm excited to hear questions, and there's lots of options. This is just one way we can do things. There's lots of different ways, lots of different planning and assessment instruments, and development isn't all bad. And so that's what's crucial to know. Development isn't all bad. There needs to be economic development in these regions. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of situations that we have privilege in Southern Ontario to not have to deal with, and we've benefited a lot from a lot of these resources. But at the same point in time, a lot of the way economic development is done, if it's not regulated, if it's not considered for the long term, can have really challenging and unfair consequences on the people that need it most. So, thanks. Water. Does anybody have any questions for Cole?
Where do we start?
That's a good question. Well, the government should keep funding me. It's actually it's already started a bit. So what I've been talking about is actually, interestingly, not that far off from potentially the future. We've been academically in my area, we've been talking about this for about 30, 40 years. Something called sustainability assessment, strategic environmental assessment, this stuff. Recently, the federal government sent a commission around Canada and said, we know you don't trust environmental assessment anymore, Canadians. We want to regain your trust. What can we do? So this commission went all across Canada, talked to people, talked to Indigenous communities, talked to non-Indigenous communities, asked for their experience. They were really, really bright folk that were on this panel. I actually tailed them a bit because I had a little extra cash and I wanted to be a groupie for a little while, never got that opportunity, so why not with a commission on the assessment process? So I saw them in 3 different places, and they just came out with their report. So I actually was presenting at the International Association for Impact Assessment Conference in Montreal this March, and I had 2 presentations, one on something I knew I was going to talk about, and one I was going to report on how the Commission didn't listen to Canadians, because I had done this whole thing about recording what Canadians had said about what they wanted. And the report came out 2 days before my presentation, and they listed everything that Canadians said. They said, we want sustainability-based assessment, we want strategic level assessment, we want Indigenous concerns heard. You need to change these things, because environmental assessment is not working in Canada. And I said, damn it. What am I going to say? So that was a much more challenging presentation than this one, I'll tell you that. But it was, so this report has come out. And so it's put the feds in a really challenging position because they put a lot of investment and time into this, and they now have to see how they're going to change federal assessment legislation to reflect this report, which is extremely, like, I met with a bunch of academics in the area, and they said, it's like Christmas morning, you gave us every present about the report. But it only works if it's a full suite. So it could be starting as soon as probably early 2018, the new legislation federally. Provincially, it's a different story. Provincially, it's across the board different. Ontario has actually some really good basis for legislation because their legislation is based on the well-being of Ontarians, is what their legislation is built on. So it sort of has that broader understanding of environmental issues. But I'm cautiously optimistic that things are changing. That said, you can get involved if something's happening. If it becomes an election issue, EA reform, make sure that that's something you say to whoever your potential MP or MPP is. Make sure you follow that information when it's going on the internet. It actually makes a huge amount of difference, a well-done environmental assessment over a poorly done environmental assessment. The Site C Dam in British Columbia is one of the worst environmental assessments I've ever seen in my entire life. And what's happening is it became an election issue. And that's why the Liberals did not win a majority, right?
Yeah.
So
the Greens went with the NDP over the Site C issue, so.
exactly. And Site C is a disaster, not just environmentally, because you're flooding like a massive amount of productive environment, farmland, and also changing the ecosystem. But it's extremely expensive, and it's going to raise hydro rates the same as in Ontario, and you don't have anywhere to put that power. It's not needed. And they have all of these old and abandoned wells that you can use for geothermal that they haven't explored, and there's other things they haven't explored, and so it's just encouraging always alternatives. And also understanding that assessments that are well done cost more. But in the long term, they cost the government and less. So that's my long answer to that question.
How long does a traditional assessment take?
A long time, a year, maybe two, for a big project like that. Could be longer, could be shorter. But it takes 77 years from an average mine in BC from staking to production. And it goes over 77. And in that time, there'll be 7 companies that own it. So if you're thinking about how long-term an investment a mine is, 2 years of assessment processes, to me, it only makes sense, right? I mean, this is something that you're going to have, and you're going to have a legacy forever. Mining legacy is pretty much forever. And you can take the land back to a butiful environment, but people are still not going to use the medicinal herbs from that land, right? Do you really want to eat something that had a tailings pond there before? I certainly wouldn't. So, I think that it's an investment in time, but again, decision time saves time. Yes.
What is your background? Like, how did you get interested in this
Oh,
area?
that's a cool question. So I'm from St. Mary's. I grew up here. I had some really great teachers, and I didn't know what I wanted exactly to do with myself when I went to university. I was really good at geography, and I really liked it, and world issues and stuff like that. So I spoke to my amazing geography teacher, a guy named Fred Crafton, who Mr. McCash will know from, so I said, I don't know what I want to do. And I said, I really like this stuff, but I don't know if there's jobs in it. And so the next day, he's an odd guy, right? He was an odd guy. So he's not like one of those guys who would get emotionally involved in the conversation, but he would really think about what I was saying. And he came back, and he just threw on my desk like this, and then walked away a stack of recommended programs. And the one, Environment Resource Studies from University of Waterloo, was the one he'd highlighted and said the best. Funnily enough, I think of my graduating class of 50, 8 or 10 of us went into sort of geography, international development, world issue stuff, because of a major influence in that, because we knew that there were potential opportunities and jobs. So I got I was about to start my degree, and I went with a friend in Toronto to this award show for environmental advertising. It was called the Greening Awards by the Toronto Environmental Alliance. And there was this hysterical man making fun of car ads. And he was this University of Waterloo professor, and he was everything I ever envisioned a professor to look like. He had the white beard, and he had the cut-off, the shorts that are also pants, and you zip them off, just in case climate change, the water comes and you gotta get ready. And he was exactly what I ever envisioned. And he was this prof at Environmental Resource Studies at University of Waterloo. And I took his course, and I fell in love, but not like I love my husband, but like in a different way. And so I said to him, I'd really like to take it was like an advanced course. So he let me in, and he thought I was weirdo enough that he liked me. So then he became my mentor. And as my mentor, he was like, you should go out and try different things. So I did a few courses with him, and then I did my master's in global governance, where I studied invasive species and networks that they move around on. And then I did, because it was offered to me, a master's in the study of law at Western Ontario, where I also looked at invasive species, but I did some other stuff, some mediation stuff and stuff like that. I didn't know if I wanted to do a PhD. And so I contacted Bob. I was like, I don't know what I should do. And he goes, well, we'll get you money and you'll be fine and we'll get you in. And I was like, I haven't applied yet. Like, I'm past the deadline. He goes, no, it's fine. If you want to do it, I'll take you and we'll do it. But I didn't know what I wanted to do my research on. So, but I didn't think it was mines. Like, I certainly didn't think it was mines. And Bob is a very convincing gentleman, I will tell you that. And he said to me, I think you should just read this bit. Like, I knew I liked assessment work, because I think it makes a lot of sense in the world to think about problems before they happen and try and anticipate them. As a human being, we should all try and do that, right? Like, that's what we should do. We try and think about problems. And Bob was, Bob kept just sort of saying this and doing this, and all of a sudden I'm in a meeting with people from Yabaton. And I'm like, I guess I'm doing this for my dissertation research. He's like, and they're talking about me going up, and then they're talking about how they want to pay me to be a consultant and all this stuff, and I was like, I was manipulated into this and I didn't even know. So anyways, and he always told me that, and then I got federal funding from the government in Sharp to do it too. So it sort of just happened that this is an area where there's a lot of work right now and a lot of research. And I fell into it, and it turns out I love it. Not that I love mining, it's not like I love going up to mines or things like that, but I really, really